lecture is entitled Sex Research, specifically focusing on older adults by Dr. Bev Knox. According to Healthline.com, there's a common misperception that the desire for sex and romantic relationships diminishes as we get older. Let me test your knowledge. Do you believe that to be true? Well, some younger people believe it is. They can't even imagine their parents or grandparents ever having sex. Society's beliefs about aging and sex are complex in a variety of ways. One common belief is that as we get older, we become less interested in having sex, that we don't want it and we don't need it. This is definitely a misconception, a farce, a lie, a fabrication. Sex research explores how misconceptions like these can complicate the acceptance of middle and older adult sexual lives, their attitudes, and their behaviors.
In a recent study published in the Journal of Sex Research, it was found that adults ages 60 to 80 expressed not only a desire, but a need for sexual intimacy in a relationship. Most of us thinking people didn't really need a research study to confirm this.
But it is always good to have research back up what common sense can relay.
According to Kinsey, a pioneering sex researcher, men's sexual peak typically occurs in the late teens, around 17 to 18 years of age, when they report the highest number of orgasms.
Women, on the other hand, tended to reach their prime later, often in their 30s, when they reported more consistent orgasms. Many women report feeling their most sexually motivated in their early 40s.
Yes, over 40 years of age. Biologically speaking, there isn't a clear definition of a sexual peak. People have satisfying sex throughout their adult lives. Sex drive and sexual function change over time, but those changes don't decrease people's satisfaction with sex. Older adults who report sexual activity report greater overall well-being and life satisfaction. While older adults may have the same desire for sexual intimacy, they may experience certain challenges, which we will cover in this course.
But first, just a reminder, we do have several sponsors for this course, so please review them and utilize their services as you see fit. That will be very helpful to us. Now, let us dive into Dr. Knox's learning video lecture, Sex Research in Human Sexuality.
This lecture is entitled Sex Research in Psychology by Dr. Bev Knox. We will first review an article by Dr. Ramchandra Lamba. According to Dr. Lamba, in the field of psychology, human sexuality is extremely rich and has been observed and analyzed by psychologists since time immemorial. Sophisticated studies that aim to explore all the complexities of human sexual behavior require research methods that are accurate and powerful enough to delve into the intricacies of experiences, norms, and biological influences across different individuals and societies. This article discusses some of the predominant research approaches that psychologists use to investigate the conduct and feelings of individuals about human sexuality, as well as their weaknesses and ethical concerns. Let us begin by answering this question. What are the main research methods used in studying human sexuality in psychology? According to Dr. Lamba, the main research methods used in studying human sexuality in psychology include surveys and questionnaires, observational studies, physiological measurements, interviews and focus groups, longitudinal studies, experimental studies, and case studies. First, we will review surveys and questionnaires. The most particular way of collecting data about the sexual attitudes, practices, and experiences of individuals often involve self-reported answers. They can be given to patients in a number of formats, such as in-person appointments, online, and other ways. Second, observational studies. Scientists may watch and record sexual behaviors in controlled settings, like public streets or laboratories, or may want to record the behaviors of wild animals. While scientific studies mostly advocate the direct observation technique, ethical issues and privacy matters remain a limit to its use. Third, physiological measurements. Tools such as monitoring genital sensations, hormone levels, and the central nervous system activity may reveal the biological and physiological aspects of sex response. Next, interviews and focus groups. While the qualitative approach helps in gathering rich data in terms of subjective incidents, It is very important for understanding the sexual beliefs of individuals and their attitudes and experiences. Then, there is longitudinal studies. Such followings of participants would go on for a longer span of time, and then professionals would be able to track alterations in sexual outlooks, behaviors, or any other experiences over time. Next, experimental studies. In the laboratory, with shaken variables and under full control by the researchers. This is the best setup to study causal relations involving sexual responses and outcomes. And lastly, case studies. The analysis of individual cases by way of specific sex issues, problems, or experiences is one of the ways having an in-depth look into the given instances can provide. The next question we will examine is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of experimental research in studying human sexuality? According to Dr. Lamba, the experimentation permitted as part of the research study of human sexology presents both advantages and challenges. Here are some key points to consider. Let us begin by taking a look at the advantages. First, controlled environment. Experiments provide researchers with an opportunity to isolate variables and conduct controls, taking away the ambiguity of potentially conflating outside factors, thus resulting in a cause and effect relationship, understanding of the variable of interest. Second, physiological measurements. In experiments, electrodes may be used to measure genital arousal, hormonal levels within the body, or brain activities that help to explain the functions and processes of sex. Third, testing interventions. Experiments can be used to assess the efficacy of the implementation of treatment options or prevention programs that are related to sexual performance, function, or well-being. The fourth advantage is ethical controls. In the controlled setting of the laboratory, the researchers can maintain a high ethical code of conduct and protect the rights and safety of the participants. Now let us review the disadvantages. First being artificial settings. The laboratory experiments might fail in the element of ecological validity, since the artificial environment perhaps does not accurately duplicate the setting outside. Second, participant recruitment. Searching for volunteers to be involved in sexual experiments, discretionary situations, and physiological measurements is usually hard. Next is ethical concerns. Studies that involve participants in the bodies of individuals, their behaviors, or their alteration entail serious problems of consent, privacy, and potential mental or emotional consequences. Next, limited generalizability. Experimental trials tend to examine data involving smaller, homogeneous samples, which makes it difficult to extrapolate the findings meaningfully to more diverse populations. And lastly, difficulty studying complex behaviors. Attempting to replicate some of the complex sexual behaviors or circumstances that might be difficult to study in a controlled or experimental setting may turn out to be a little challenging. Now, let us review some emerging trends and future directions in the study of human sexuality in psychology. Research in the field of human sexuality psychology is always an evolving process. Thus, various established patterns and aspects that researchers explore and investigate presently are among what they accept for the future. Some of these include, first, increased focus on diverse sexualities and identities, giving priority to learning and understanding the memories and points of view of people who have unconventional sexual preferences, gender identities, and expressions. The conventional heteronormative and binary approach has been obscured. Second, integration of technology and online behaviors. The researchers, along with the digital technologies and online platforms, are discussing the effects the latter has on sexual behavior, relationships, and identity formation, including online dating, cybersex, and the role of social media. Third, expansion of cross-cultural and cross-national studies. With the current trend toward globalization, there must be another investigation of cross-cultural and cross-national research to examine and understand how cultural norms, values, and contexts shape sex attitudes and behaviors. Next is the emphasis on sexual well-being and positive sexuality. Instead of considering solely sexual dysfunction risks, or how to find out more about types of sexual experiences and relationships that influence overall sexual health in adults, there is a trend toward understanding the factors that contribute to positive sexual experiences, healthy relationships, and good sexual relationships. Fifth, incorporation of intersectionality. In this, the researchers are taking note of the fact that more emphasis is being laid upon studying the multiple dimensions of personal identity, which include but are not limited to race or ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and disability. These factors further act as catalysts in molding the sexual experiences and outcomes of the concerned individual. Next is neuroscientific and physiological approaches. Brain science and the advances in physiological measurement are not the only fields that researchers turn to for insight into the biology and neurology of sexual behavior, desire, and response. Next is longitudinal and lifespan perspectives. A matter of concern is extending current cross-sectional studies into longitudinal ones that trace experiences of sexual behavior, attitudes, and knowledge over the lifetime course from the youth stage to later adult age. And lastly, interdisciplinary collaborations. With human sexuality being a complex and multidimensional matter, experts from various disciplines are becoming part of scientific teams more often to underpin the research with more diversified knowledge, such as anthropology, criminology, public health, and education. According to Dr. Lamba, psychology research methods are central to the search for knowledge about human sexuality, inasmuch as the process encompasses the biological as well as the cultural and social elements of the phenomenon. In order to achieve this, the researchers can use a vast number of methodological approaches. Consequently, they will be able to gain perspectives on complexities involving sexual behavior, attitudes, and relationships. The programs aimed at promoting sexual health and addressing sexual dysfunction can be explained. Also, people may start accepting and understanding different sexual expressions. Researchers must take into account ethical considerations and relate methodological problems, so that the outcome of their research remains uncompromised, with the ultimate goal being a comprehensive understanding of human sexuality. In conclusion, let us review the historical account for the science of sex and sexuality. The Dutch microscopist Anton van Leeuwenhoek, 1632 to 1723, had discovered sperm swimming in human semen. In 1875, Oscar Hertwig, 1849 to 1922, first observed the actual fertilization by the sperm in sea urchins, although the ovum in humans was not directly observed until the 20th century. Psychological aspects of human sexuality came with the work of the Viennese physician Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, the founder of psychiatry and psychoanalysis. They began their work in the Victorian era, the late 1800s, both in the United States and in Europe. Norms about sexuality were extraordinarily rigid and oppressive. Historian Peter Gay characterized this as the repressive aspect of Victorian cultural norms. Certainly, traces of these Victorian attitudes remain with us today, yet at the same time, the actual sexual behavior of Victorians was sometimes in violation of societal norms. Henry Havelock Ellis, 1859 to 1939, published a series of volumes entitled Studies in the Psychology of Sex, beginning in 1896. He believed that women, like men, are sexual creatures. Richard von Krafft-Ebing, 1840 to 1902, special interest was pathological sexuality. He coined the concepts of sadism, masochism, and pedophilia, and the terms heterosexuality and homosexuality. Surveys of human sexual behavior in the United States, conducted by Alfred Kinsey and his colleagues in the 1940s, and with Masters and Johnson's investigations of sexual disorders and the physiology of sexual response. The scientific study of sex has not emerged as a separate, unified academic discipline like biology or psychology or sociology. It tends to be interdisciplinary, a joint effort by biologists, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, and physicians. Please be advised, this is an educational, academically sound psychology course by Dr. Bev Knox for adult student learners. Lecture content include discussions and representations of human sexuality, theoretical perspectives on sexuality, sex research, sexual anatomy, sex hormones, sexual arousal, attraction and love theories, gender and sexuality, sexual orientation, variations in sexual behavior, sexual coercion, sex for sale, sexual disorders, and sex therapy, ethics and religion on sexuality, and sex laws. Before beginning the course, please be mindful of your capacity to witness and respond to videos, books, and images of this content material.